I think it's time to add a image to our to-dos. As opposed to just to our profile screen, we are going to have it so that you can have an image for every to-do in the list. See if I can find a place for me on the screen here out of the way. So in general, we're going to be going through these steps. I think we're going to start this on the Xano side, just to make sure that we're getting all of the correct data set up, and then we'll move that into the list and then into the to-do details screen. So currently, we've already done an upload image for the profile page. And when I did that, even though I have a generic name of upload image, I did make it specific to the user because we're attaching the media ID from our table to the column in the user record. I could make that generic and break things out, but I'm going to leave everything in place as we have it, and I'm going to add a new API in, a new upload API, specific for a to-do primary image. Okay, so we have our upload section, and I want it to be grouped in that section. And we haven't really talked through this in detail before, but if you notice, Xano does a great job of grouping their APIs. And the way you can get that to happen if you're creating your own, as we click on the Add API, we'll do Start from Scratch. If you just lead with the text that is meant to be grouping, in this case, upload, and then we'll call it to do primary. And this won't be a post because we're not retrieving data. This is going to be a post, or it's not a get, it will be a post because we're going to be sending data to the server. And then we will have our user authentication turned on. Okay, so now we've got our palette to work with here, our function stack and such. But since we're going to be testing it here shortly, let me go ahead and do my login so I have an auth token to work with. And like one time I remembered to do this before I start the video, so you get to sit through this each time. Where am I going here? Okay, login. Run and debug, we'll do our usual, we'll log me in, and then we'll work with that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab this just in case I copy and paste nothing else, I'll have it ready to go. Okay, so since we're uploading an image, the first thing that we're gonna want to do is add in, I can never quite find where I want to be. There we go. I want to add in a storage type for the input. And then I'm going to pick file. And I'm going to be consistent. I've seen the Xano folks use content. I've used it. I'm going to always, for my file uploads, use file type, obviously, and then a name of content. The first thing we need to do with that content variable that's coming in is we need to change it into an image metadata. So we're going to create image metadata. Once again, I've got kind of a standard I always use. I just call it image, keep it simple. And we're going to create that image variable from the content input. Go ahead and save that. So now we're passing in what will be a base 64 encoded image like we've done for our profile image. We're going to turn it into an image variable. And then all I need to do next is add that record to the media table where I'm storing all of my images, no matter how they're used. And then the image metadata is coming from the variable we just created. So that's all the input we need. And then our output will be the metadata, the URL. If you remember, Xano added in a full URL variable, so this is new and very usable. Before, we were using path, and we had to append or prepend the base URL of Xano onto that. So I would recommend always using just the full path when you're passing it back to AppGyver. And then we'll just leave it as media for the variable name coming out of the output. And at this point, done creating the basics of it. Let me just make sure that works. Let's see, what did I, okay, so the shunia.github.io, this is where I've gone, as you may remember from prior videos, to get my test images. This is the format that Xano expects when you're passing in base64 data. There's this data image PNG base64 header, and then all of the base64 encoded data that normally would come from AppGyver, but we're going to get a 1-pixel image just to confirm that our API that we just created is working. Okay, so I'm going to paste the data there for the image. I'm going to come back over and copy my authentication token so that we can test. So I should see that I have it wrong. I know why I have it wrong too. Simple mistake. Since I changed the output of the variable, I didn't change it in the response. So I need to come down to the response, pick media, and that will return to me when we rerun this test. That will return all of the metadata that proves that the API is working. I was going to say, hey, we'll run the test, but it's probably not necessary. How hard could this be? But guess what? It's always worth running a test. Let's see if this works. It may not. There we go. So if you notice here, the full URL, as I was talking about before, as opposed to just a base URL or relative URL without the base on it. Okay, so it worked. And just to visually see that, we come down to the bottom, and there it is. And it looks like the prior one worked as well. I should explain that. The API broke on the first test where you saw me debugging, but the reason that the image is there is because the broken was on the response variable, which means I went through the full function stack here and created the image and put it to the database and then failed on the response. That's why we saw both of those there. Okay, so now I have the basics in place for creating or uploading the image as base64. Now what I want to add in is I want to associate the ID of this media item to the to-do that we're creating it for. So to make that work, we're missing a piece. And give us a full screen back. I am going to need the ID of the to-do that I'm in. And so I'm kind of a fan of doing these in this fashion. Let me get the settings. I like to see it as part of the URL as opposed to a body when I do the ID. And so the way you do that is a /ID. And now Xano will recognize this as meaning that the URL you use in AppGyver needs to have a number, in our case, a to-do ID at the end. But I do still have to add it into the input so that I have access to that down here in the function stack. If I didn't also add the ID reference here to match this, I would not have access to it in my function stack. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is a database request. And since this is an existing to-do, I am going to go with the edit of the to-do. And so we're obviously going to get it based on the ID. And the field value will be from the input. And that will be the ID that we just set up. And then I don't need to change created at or name or description. We're not doing any of those edits yet. What we are doing is, or created by. You'll see that I've forgot the most important part here. There is no more database fields to add to because I'm going to go ahead and save this because I've not changed the database. We need to go into the media database right here, and we need to add a table reference. And that table reference is going to be to media. There we go. So now I have my column media ID. This is what I was looking for just now when I was doing the update to the API, the function stack. but obviously wasn't going to be there because I had not added it. So I'm going to come back down to the add record that I was just looking at. We're matching on ID. We're not going, oh, I need to refresh. If you're working on separate tabs like I am, if you don't refresh the second tab that I switched over to, then it doesn't pick up the change I made in another tab. But here we go. Now, oh, hold on. I can't believe you let me do that. I wish you guys were here in real time with me because I just added media ID to the media table. I'm guessing if I could hear you, you were all yelling at me to not do that. If I stop and pay attention, we go into the to-do, and that's where we do a table reference to media. There we go. This will work out much better for me. Refresh the page because I'm on a different tab, come back down, and there, media ID. Okay, so we know that above this in the function stack, we did an add record to the media, and that we made it a variable name of media. And so now all I have to do is select that variable and type .id. And now when I rerun this test, nope, I'm going to clean this up. I don't like the _1 because it doesn't have meaning to me. We'll just call it to do updated. I'm a fan of naming the variables in as meaningful as a pattern as you can. It'll help you when you come back later and try to figure out what you were doing. Okay. So at this point, I will have a test that should associate the media ID. Okay, so I still have that image. I'm going to grab my token while I'm thinking about it. And we'll paste that in. And then I need to go find the ID of one of our existing to-dos. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. How about we go with number 1? And if we run this, you'll see that we once again returned the same data. Probably want to return the to-do updated data, to be honest. But let's confirm that what we just tested worked. I'm going to refresh. There it is. So media ID of 60. And if I go into the media table, scroll to the bottom, there it is. Okay, so we have all of that tying back as it should. What I want to do next is change my response to be to do updated instead of media. And so we got that. So now we're returning the to-do data. And I also, in this edit record, I want to go to the output of it because now I want to add in the picture data that we just got because I want to get the URL passed back for that item. Okay, so I want to attach to media. Sorry, I want to attach to there we go. Let me think through what I'm doing. Okay, we're going to do an add-on. We want to create a new add-on. We want it to be the media data, and it's going to be a single item, and we're going to match on media ID. And we'll just leave that as media. Okay. So now when I look at this and I run it again, I will have data coming back that also has my URL. And I think what I might do here actually, just to keep it clean when we move it to AppGyver, I'm going to say that, what all do I, well, it's not where I want to be. I want to click on media here. I was customizing the main to-do, and I don't really want to do that. I want to customize the media add-on. So I click on that and then come into customize. I'm going to turn all of them off. Can't do it that way. I'm going to click all of the ones I don't want. And I think all of the ones I don't want is pretty much everything except, oh, I see what I did. Okay. So I can't unclick image. As you can tell, I've never actually done it with the image before. Image is a hierarchy, and all the rest of this stuff is below that hierarchy. So I need to leave image checked, but I don't want all the other stuff. I really just want the URL coming back. That'll keep it simpler in AppGyver. Okay, so at this point, we're going to rerun. What do I have in my clipboard? Cool. And then we'll come back and grab our base64 encoded pinkish image. And we will update to do number 2 and run that. Okay, so this is the data that will be going to AppGyver. And so we keep it kind of simple. It'll be media image URL. It'll be _media.image.url when we're in AppGyver. It'll be that level of depth that we want to access. So let me just go confirm that I have another image, and then let me go into the to-do and make sure that number 2 has 61, and it does. Okay, and so now what I've done is I've created an upload. I've associated the uploaded image to the to-do based on the ID that gets passed in and the base64 encoded image, and then I'm returning back the URL, which means if all goes well, we will want the endpoint. So I'm going to click endpoint URL so that we get a copy of that. And now we're going to switch back over to AppGyver, and we are going to go to data. And instead of upload image, I'm going to create another one of those, a separate one. Just like we've done before, reference ID will be upload to do primary. And the reason I'm calling it to do primary is my aspiration is to also create an image gallery, so one-to-many images, as kind of a note-taking approach for the to-do, meaning whoever does the to-do can take multiple pictures and have a gallery in addition to having the primary image. So that's why I've named it the way I have. We'll see if we actually get to that, but that's the thought process behind it. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can just leave the ID on here as part of the base, and then just turn on the create record, because that's the only thing we're going to have for this one. Normally we wouldn't have that. We would just set it up on the get and the post, but let's experiment a little bit. Okay, so if I look at test and the custom object ID, okay, so it's there, but I need to set a custom schema. So I've got my create post. Let me step back here a sec. I've got my create record post. It has, it has everything there, but I don't really like the way it sets this up. So I'm going to make a little bit of a change on my base. I'm going to get rid of the ID at the end. And save that. And then we'll come to the create record post, and we will add that in. To me, that's a little more explicit of what we're expecting, and I like that a little bit better. Okay. And then URL placeholder. I'm going to do a comparison real quick because I'm drawing a blank on whether I have to set this up. So I'm going to go back to the one that we have working with upload image and look at the base. Upload image, resource URL is, well, that's going to be part of the problem, but I think I might have, no, I've got that named right. And then I have to set up my authorization on the base, which I have not done. And then if I come look at the create record post, okay, yeah, that one didn't have an ID, so it's a little different. Okay, so the authorization is the piece I've forgotten at this point. So let's go and add that in. Authorization, text, it is not static. There we go. So why don't we go ahead and see if we can execute this with a test. So my authorization, I need to go back and get my key here, my token. I need to change this to be static text. I'm getting better because now I'm remembering to add bearer space to the beginning. And then for the custom object, I need to add in the ID, but I am missing something. I have to change my schema because we need more than just the ID. So we're going to go over to schema and we're going to do a custom schema. And we are going to say content. Title can be image content. It's text. Save that. And then come back to it. What do we look like here? Yeah, so I did the custom schema. I was curious if it would remember, and it didn't. I have to do my ID as well, which it does make sense. And this is a to-do ID, and it is a number. Okay, let's save that. And hopefully I've gotten myself to a point very slowly, I guess, where I can now do a test from AppGyver. Okay, so we do our auth token. We are going to do ID number 3, and I am going to come back and grab what it will be, the image, but just to be picky, just so I can see a different color, we are going to change the color of it, grab that URL. Okay, so there. So now when I run this, I should end up with a response here like we saw on Xano, and an image, and I didn't. Okay, what I've done is I've got a mismatch between that ID and how I'm set. The ID that I put the way I like it back here in Xano, I think I'm screwing stuff up doing that. I don't have that matched up the way that I need to. So with what I'm doing in AppGyver. So you're going to get to live through a little bit of debugging with me here. I'm going to come back to wonder if none of these have IDs on them for how I have them set up. I was hoping I could find an example to copy from. To do, yeah, probably on a create to do. What are my schemas? So properties of the schema, description and name. So the only way I've set this up is in the body. So for the sake of you bearing with me on this, I'm gonna see if we can't just change this, and I'll do that cleanup later. Okay, so now it should both be part of the payload, and maybe I'll have a little bit better luck. I won't be passing it on the parameter. Well, you know, and I think I just figured out why that's the case, but let me just continue with this so that I don't go in circles. We're going to get rid of this and save it. And let's see if I've got a valid test that I can do now. So we can keep this rolling. 3. We got the data image. I'm going to go grab my auth token again. Make this static and error. Okay. See if I get a good run now. There we go. Okay. I know what I need to do to get the ID on the main URL. I'll talk through it, but not make the change right now so we can keep moving. But I did get all of the data back, and I want to set my schema accordingly. I think all I need to do, save this, is for the create record post is add a URL placeholder. That's what I was missing. When I add a URL placeholder, that will allow me to pass the ID on the URL. Not too big of a deal right now. We're going to keep rolling because what we really want to see is images show up in our list. Okay. So now when I get my list back, so from an AppGyver screen perspective, I'm getting a list, which means we have a data variable. So I switch to variables. Here's my to-do one. I'm getting a collection, and I'm putting that into a data variable so that we have access to it, right? Here's my data variable. And what I want to do is update that API. That's what I want to do. I'm not passing back everything I need in that API. I am when I upload the image, but when I get a list, it did not know in my to-do git collection that when I query all the records, that the output also needs to contain the same add-on for media. And we'll do kind of the same thing here. So I'm passing back just the URL in addition. So if I do that almost every time, don't I? I got to re-log in because I ended up using the wrong tab so I can get a token. And then we're going to test it. And then we'll update AppGyver with that new schema. Run that. Okay. So I'm in my first tab, just for my own benefit, reminding myself. We just updated the get to do item. We added the add-on. And now what I want to do is run and debug. No filter, run and debug. And so for each item now, I'm getting back the image URL, which will only be for, well, that's interesting. Obviously broken, right? Because I'm getting back the add-on with just the base URL. And I think I know why. Maybe. Let's see. So I have a broken, that's what this comes down to. This should be the full URL, but it should only be for items 1, 2, and 3. But you'll see that this one just has the base URL, which means I think I need to create a different add-on because I like haphazardly grabbed this media one. And what I want to do, URL, I'm going to delete that. I'm in the to-do, and I have a media ID. And I'm going to try recreating this single item. Hopefully I had the other one right. You know, now that I think about it, I didn't really pay enough attention to what I had in the other API to make sure it was right. There we go. So I got the right information on that. So if this all works, we should have our list and we should be good to go. So I've got the to-do updated. I'm going to leave everything in there because I'm more curious to see if I come back to here and come back to the to-do and get collection. I should be able to run a test on this. And see, there it is. Now the only problem we may have is the ones that don't have an image URL, but we're going to see what happens. I want to set the schema. I almost forgot. Save that. And this should be our approaching our telltale moment here. Because now if I come in, when I get this list, I'm now getting back the URL. So the image source is going to be from property of a data item and repeat. We're going to look at current. We're going to look at media. Oop, hold on here, current. And we're going to go looking for, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so what we'll need to do is pass back a default, because when the media comes back as null, my test is not working correctly. I'm going to try one more quick way before we make big changes. Because my database in my to-do, item number 1 will come back and it's wash the dog. The reason I'm doing this will become obvious, but for the moment it's going to seem really cryptic. I'm going to retest the Git collection for the to-do. And as that test, I want to add a filter, wash the dog. Then I'm going to go back and get my token. And the reason I'm doing this is AppGyver is looking at probably the first data record that came back for the schema, and media was null, which means it assumed that was the same for everything. So if I rerun this test, I'm just getting the one item back, and it has a full media setup. And I should now, because I picked item number 1, wash the dog, I should now be able to successfully get to my URL. So if you have an API that's returning a variable set of data, like we are right now, because not everything has an image, you want to make sure that on your test and your set schema, you pull one back that has all data. And just to see what that does for us, we're going to go back in. There we go. And pick the URL and see if we can't make this work for us. Okay, there we go. So these are obviously not in to-do ID order, but if you notice, we have a very bright image coming back. So what we're going to do in the next video, I think I've drug us far enough down into the dirt on this one, is we're going to clean up this image. We're going to give it some rounded corners. We're going to use some real images, meaning that we're going to hook the camera up so that the camera is taking a picture and then passing that back to Xano and putting it in the list. So that means when you are editing or creating a to-do item, you will be able to take a picture of the to-do, like the dishwasher, the yard, the mower, whatever it is, to kind of add a little bit of flavor and visual to the to-dos. So it took a little longer than I expected, which is kind of the norm right now. But come back for the next one and we'll make this a lot more functional.